Any Space Marine will tell you the standard weapon going into battle is the bolter. I'm going to show you how to make it right here on the Evil Ted channel. Calling all Space Marines. If you're preparing for battle, you're going to need the bolter. That's right. So go ahead, click on that link down below, download the pattern, and let's start building this for the Imperium. We have all our pieces cut out. The paper pattern has been spray mounted onto some poster board. Now we're going to start with the side pieces first. We're going to cut off what we don't need for the side pattern. Starting with the top sight, the magazine, the handle, and the trigger. Next, we're going to cut out the side details. And of course, I'm going to cut off the front detail, the light, and the barrel support. Now we're going to trace the pattern onto 10mm foam. We are going to glue our two pieces of 10mm foam together using Spray 77 glue. Now the foam is glued together. Let's trace the pattern using our 1, 2, 3 box and a white Uni-ball pen. When tracing the front grip of the bolter, just use the indentations on the grip, then go back in with a straight edge and connect the lines. So I'm going to cut using a metal straight edge and a utility knife. Going to sharpen my blade using my sharpener. Now the base of our gun is all cut out. Let's put on the right side detail. We have our right side detail template right here. We're going to cut out using a craft knife and a straight edge. Now trace on the right side. Now the body is cut out and the slide detail has been traced. Let's pull them apart. To add detail, we're going to cut all the way through the foam using a craft knife and a straight edge. The side edge and the two switches need to be recessed as well. The left side is done. Now we're going to move on to the right side. Now the side is done. Let's move on to gluing. Remove our detail pieces and apply a generous amount of contact cement to all 4 sides. Now place the piece back in while the cement is still wet. Then adjust the depth about 2mm deep. This creates a nice recess. Do the same technique to the side recess details as well. Doing the right side, I find it works better if you put the parts in from behind. This leaves less glue residue to clean up. now we're going to take the 10mm foam and cut out 1.5-inch strips for our side of our bolter. Now that we have our 1.5-inch 10mm strips cut out, the next step is to take a utility knife and cut out the back sides of our detail. We want to make sure these pieces sit nice and flat. The next step is to cut our strips to size and glue them onto our bolter. Apply contact cement, let dry, and then apply. Now that our 10mm strips are all glued down, the next step is we're going to add 1-inch foam for the bottom where the handle of our bolter is going to be. The reason I use 1 inch is because it's nice, thick, and make sure the handle is stable. For the bolter receiver, we're going to use 8mm foam on both sides. Take the magazine pattern and place it inside with the window flush with the bottom of the receiver. Trace your glue lines and then add a piece of 10mm foam cut to size. I find this fits easier when you apply it when the contact cement is still wet. Now the top and bottom parts are secured, let's glue the bolter sides together. Apply a generous amount of contact cement and then put them together while the glue is still wet. This gives you a little bit of working time. Be sure you get the edges all lined up. Once you get the edges lined up, pick some straight pins and pin it in place and let it dry. Now that it's dry, remove the pins and make sure to check all the edges. If there's any gaps, press them down and make sure there's good contact. Get the handle pattern and cut out the trigger. Again, be sure to keep this part of the pattern. We're going to use it later. Tracing the handle onto 1-inch foam. We're going to cut this out using the bandsaw. Next, we're going to cut out the side grips. Then trace them onto 6mm foam. Cut them out on the bandsaw. Okay, let's go back and finish cutting the rest of the parts. Let's finish cutting the details on our lower part grip using a craft knife. For the main gun slide detail patterns, we'll be using 10mm foam. I want the top edge to be beveled, so we're going to be using Rocket Prop's Bev-All Cutter. Nice, clean, and a consistent bevel. Perfect. Now the bevel is cut out, let's trace the pattern onto the back side of our foam. And cut it out. For the round indentations, let's cut some of the foam using a craft knife, but not all the way to the edge. With a rotary tool and a sanding drum, we're going to clean them up. Let's go back in with a stone bit and smooth it out. Now our side indentations are all cleaned up. We're going to move on to the handle. We're going to take the grips and bevel the back, the top, and the sides, but not the bottom. We want to keep that edge square. We're going to use our sanding drum to run up the edges. Now switch over to our stone bit and smooth it out. Now that is done, we're going to trace the bottom of the handle using the pattern and 10mm foam. I'm going to trace it out twice. Cut it out. Take the parts to the spray booth. And we're going to glue them together using some Spray 77. Now we're going to round off the edges using the belt sander. We're going to glue them together. Now place a handle on the top of the bottom handle and trace it out. Then pull them apart. Then with a sanding drum, we're going to bevel and round off the edges. Of course, go back in with a stone bit and clean it up. We're going to glue them together. Now they're glued together, let's glue it onto the handle. Now let's take the trigger and trace it onto 6mm foam and cut it out. Now let's round off the edges with a stone bit and apply some contact cement and glue it to the trigger handle. Now with the left and right side detail, let's trace the extractor port. We're going to cut it out using a utility knife and a straight edge. We have our main body, and before we glue on the side slide details, we need to add some additional detail with a wood burner. Taking the pattern and cutting the detail and applying it and tracing it out, we're going to make the groove line details using a wood burner and a metal straight edge. Next, we're going to take our front grip pattern and trace it onto 6mm foam. On the bottom edge of our grips, we're going to do a cut beveled in. Just like that. Now where there's a curved detail on the grip, we're going to take a piece of brass tubing and cut those out first. I like to use brass tubing to cut the circles because this makes them nice and clean. Now take the 6mm parts and add them to the side of the gun to get the measurements for the strips underneath the grip. Make sure to cut the edges beveled on both sides. Now I have the measurements for my strips. I'm going to use a metal square to cut my strips. Now apply glue and let dry. And put them together. Okay, I got the measurements wrong. I had to go back and remake them, so if you notice that they're a lot wider, I had to go back and fix it. What's that old saying? Measure twice, cut once. Now we're going to glue on these slide side details onto our main body. Lay them down and trace out your glue lines. Apply contact cement. Let dry. When applying the side slide detail, make sure you're nice and flush with the front edge first. Then follow the top edge, making sure it's nice, flush, and even. Now let's do the right side. Now let's apply contact cement to both sides before adding our front grip. When applying the glue to the main body, be generous with the glue. Before adding the grip, make sure the back and front are facing the right direction. Attach the grip while the glue is still wet. This gives you a little bit more working time to line things up. Once it's lined up, pin it in place, and then let dry. Now the glue is dry, remove the pins, and go back in with your fingers and press and make sure everything has good contact. Next, we're going to make our sights. The front and the back sight, we're going to be using 10mm foam. I have some 10mm foam that already has a bevel cut in the back. We're going to cut them in 1-inch strips. When cutting, I like to use the grid pattern on the cutting mat to keep things nice and square. I'm going to use some 3mm foam to add some detail. Using the pattern to make sure I'm going to be cutting the foam detail in the right size, I'm going to cut a small triangle for the back sight. Apply glue. Let dry and put them together. Moving on to our front sight, using our pattern to get the measurements correct. For the top sight, mark the center line. And with your craft knife, follow the marks to the corner to make a triangle. Using a brass tube, we're going to cut a hole for the front sight. Now apply glue and put them together. For the center strip, the top of our bolter, we're going to use 6mm foam. Let's take the main body and find the center line. Then let's glue down the front sight first. Put them together. Before we glue down our 6mm strip, we need to cut a bevel in the front using a craft knife. Before we glue down our strip, I want to make sure it goes in the right place, nice and straight. So I'm going to make some measurements and draw on some glue lines. Apply contact cement, and then put them together. Next, let's glue on the back sight. Yes, see, looking good. Let's glue on our handle. Apply contact cement, and then apply the handle to the body to see where the glue needs to be applied. Put them together. Next, we're going to make the bolter magazine using 6mm foam. When cutting, be sure to keep all the edges at 90-degree angles. Apply glue and start assembling. For the bolts, we're going to be using 15mm foam dowels. Take our measurements and then cut them all to size. Apply glue to the center of the magazine and then apply glue to both sides of the foam dowels. When attaching the bolts to the magazine, make sure that they are centered. I find it's easier to put them in place when contact cement is still wet. Now the dowels are in place. Let's glue on the other side of our magazine. Oh, oops, I forgot to add the 10mm piece on the top of the magazine. We're simply going to apply contact cement to all 4 edges, slide it into place while it's still wet, and let dry. Now it's dry, go back and press fit to make sure it has good contact. Now let's glue on the bottom plate of the magazine, which is made out of 6mm foam. Let's do a test fit. It's perfect. Nice and snug. We're definitely going to go back and put magnets on this later. Next, we're going to add our barrel. We're going to need our front pattern for that. Let's cut off the excess on the side. And now let's cut out the barrel and also for our laser sight. Now let's trace it onto the foam. For the barrel, we're going to use 2-inch and 1/2-inch PVC pipe. For the mounting base for the 2-inch barrel, we're going to use 1-inch EVA foam. To get the inter circumference, we're going to heat up the EVA foam with a heat gun and press down the 2-inch pipe. Take it to the bandsaw and cut it on the inside line. Now apply contact cement and let dry. When attaching the foam base, make sure that it fits inside the circle. For the laser sight, we use a brass tube cut out a hole for the light. Let's do a test fit with the PVC pipe. Leave about a 1/4 inch gap on the back. For the laser sight, we use a small Maglite. And to turn it on, you just twist. For the extractor part, we have a 1/2 round foam dowel that's a bit too big. We're going to take it over to the bandsaw and cut it to size. Using my bandsaw guide and machine blocks to cut it to size. Check it to see if it fits. Then mark it and cut it to size. Okay, let's glue on the handle that I made out of 10mm foam. Let's cut off 10mm thick on the 1/2 round and glue on our handle. Apply contact cement, let dry. Let's move over to the left side and add the detail that I cut out of 2mm foam. Apply contact cement, let dry. Then go back in with your fingers and press it down, make sure you have good contact. Let's add our switches to the right side. We have the single fire and full auto switch made out of 6mm foam. The magazine release switch is also made out of 6mm foam with some textured foam added for detail. We're going to glue them down using contact cement. Moving on to the left side, adding 2 additional switches made out of 6mm foam. Now I've got some 10mm foam and our circle cutter. We're going to cut out some round details for the back of our gun and glue them down. Using some 2mm foam and some brass tubing, we're going to add some adjustable wheels for the back sight on our gun. We'll glue the circles together using super glue. Then glue them onto the sides of our back sight using contact cement. Now let's add our 2mm trim detail to our extractor port. Now onto the left side. For the back of the bolter, I want to clean up by using a strip of 2mm foam. Let's glue down our beveled 10mm switch. Let's glue on our front support I made out of 6mm foam. Next, with our amazing gap filler and spatula, we're going to fill in any gaps and unwanted cut lines. I like to apply it evenly with a spatula and then going back in with a wet finger and helping it smooth it out. Now the gap filler is dry, let's go back in with a sanding sponge and sand it down. Now let's make our imperial symbol. Cut out the details of the skull and the wings separately. We are going to trace the skull and the wing base onto 4mm foam. Cut them out using a craft knife. For the feather wing detail, we're going to be using 2mm foam. Using a rotary tool and stone bit, round off the skull and the top of the wing base. To add detail to our skull, we're going to use a craft knife to cut the grooves in for the teeth. For additional detail, I'm going to use a wood burner. Now do the same for the right side. Now we have the imperial symbol right and left done. Let's glue them on. I made myself a placement template. Trace my glue lines on using a white pen. Glue them on. Now our next step is to heat seal it. When heat sealing, be careful not to hit the small detail parts because the heat will ruin it. Now let's glue on the magnets to the magazine. We have 2 earth magnets together. We're going to rough up the glue sides with a stone bit. To glue down our magnet, we're going to be using Goop glue. And to hold it in place while it's drying, we'll put on some frog tape. 2 hours later, the glue is dry. Take the stone bit and rough up the magnet. Now let's glue the magnet onto the main body. Now with our heat gun, we'd heat the main body and then press the magazine in to get the placement for our magnet. The magnet leaves an impression, and that's where we're going to glue in the magnet. Around the edges and then let it dry. Now onto the back sight, it's made out of 4mm foam. It seems a bit flimsy, so I'm going to stiffen this up a little bit by using some Zap A Gap and a piece of scrap foam to rub it into the foam. We're going to do the same thing onto the front sight as well. Let's do the same thing on the front bracer too. Let's put some vent holes in our 2-inch PVC pipe. Start off with a small drill bit pilot hole. Then go back in with a stepper bit. Now let's do a test fit. We're going to put the PVC pipe onto our 1-inch foam plug, 1/2 inch deep. To make sure our 1-inch PVC is flush, we need to cut up a 1/4 inch of PVC pipe. Using some 1/2 inch masking tape and a fine tip Sharpie, we're going to make a line. And with our rotary tool and cutting wheel, we're going to cut it off. To make sure it fits nice and flat, we're going to sand the bottom with 80 grit sandpaper. Before sealing it, we're going to use a rapid fill on the open pores of the rough areas of foam. And we're going to apply this with a soft bristle brush. I like to apply at least 2 thin coats and then let dry. Now the rapid fill is dry, we're going to go back in with some 40 grit sanding sponge and smooth it down. All right, let's double check everything. It looks good. I'm going to use a wood dowel as a handle so I can hold this up while I spray on my creature cast rubber. Now I'm going to seal it with black creature cast rubber, semi-rigid. I'm going to apply it using my spray gun. To prevent my gun from clogging, I like to pour the creature cast rubber through a screen to catch any unwanted chunky bits. When using creature cast rubber, I like to add a little bit of thickening agent to it. Makes it the consistency of milk. When spraying creature cast rubber, I like to do at least 2 coats. All right, look at that. Creature cast rubber is now dry. Looks great. Our next step is painting. And there it is. This concludes part 1 on making your foam bolter. If this is your first time, guys, watching my channel, don't forget to hit the button and subscribe. Please hit that thumbs up and leave comments below. While you're at it, jump over to my website, eviltedsmith.com, where I have other patterns. And while you're there, I highly recommend you get on my mailing list. And even better, if you like the shirt that I'm wearing, on my website, hit the merch store, you can pick up your own Evil Ted shirt. I have other shirts as well. Check them out. This is great. I can't wait to see what this gun looks like when it's painted. So come back for part 2 on painting the foam bolter. See you soon, right here on the Evil Ted channel.